So I didn't find any videos on YouTube about how to disassemble and reassemble the ROHM RG38 Special Revolver. So I decided to make my own. So here we go. Before you start disassembling your ROHM 38 Special, be sure to open the chamber and make sure your revolver is clear. This revolver is clear because there's no ammo inside. If there's no ammo inside, you can begin to disassemble your revolver. First step, we remove that chamber bolt. Take that out, chamber screw, whatever you want to call it. The next step is going to be taking off your grip, which is right here. It's going to be this bolt right here. Go ahead and unscrew that. The front part should come off nice and easy, and then the back side as well. So you got your two grips, set those aside. These are just the original ROHM ones. And we'll go on to the next step. Next, I'm going to be taking out this bolt right here. This is going to be the bolt that holds in the latch that flips the chamber up and down. So for this, you're going to need a little flathead screwdriver like this. And I have a little Allen key because there's a little lock right here that you need to press in to remove the end of this screw. And I'll show you what I mean by that right here. So you take your flat Allen key, you begin unscrewing this, and you can see it doesn't really catch. It'll start coming out, but doesn't catch all the way. And you can't get it out. That's because you have to apply some pressure on this hole right here below the chamber. So you're going to take your Allen key and put it in that hole and push down so you're applying pressure to it. And then start unscrewing it. And it should slide out. So there we go. This is that bolt, that screw. Set that aside. And now you can flip your, there we go. You can pretty much flip your chamber down and it should fall right out, but don't drop it like that. But it's all right. These are pretty cheap, durable revolvers. So here you have that latch for your chamber and your chamber out. So go ahead and set that aside. And we'll get on to the next step. So now that we remove the chamber, the grips, and the chamber latch, we're gonna go ahead and take off this plate right here that covers your trigger mechanism and the hammer mechanism. So all you have to do to remove this is take out these 3 screws, 1, 2, and 3. So I'll start doing that with a flathead screwdriver. Pretty simple. This whole revolver is pretty easy, but I figured if it's your first time doing this, it's nice to have someone to watch in case you have to troubleshoot anything, or you're looking at repairing things, or just need more videos on the revolver. So here we go, we remove those 3 screws. Now, you're gonna have to apply a little bit of pressure to pull this out. And what I like to do is just take my end of my screwdriver and kind of just pry off each of the ends. You can go around this side, just kind of pry under the hammer real lightly, just so you can get enough to be able to pop it off. And there we go. So now slowly take off that cover plate, and I'll show you a little bit about the inside. So here's the inside of the revolver with the cover plate removed. You're gonna have a little, this guy down here and a little spring right here. Do not pull your trigger after you remove this because this spring will fly out. I've done that a couple times. Don't pull the trigger, don't pull the hammer back. You also have this right here. This is what is going to move your chamber, and this will also cycle your chamber down here. So this piece slides off if you want to clean it, and it goes on this notch right next to your trigger spring. So you want to have that pushed forward when you put it back together, but I'll get more into that as we put it back together. Then your plate, flip this around. You have two pieces inside the back of this plate. When you flip it around to the back side, you have a spring and this guy, this little piston kind of thing. Your spring, you can kind of see it in this hole right here. If I were to slide it out like this, that spring will fall out. So that spring goes in first if it were to come out, and then you push the piston piece of metal in with the skinny end forward into this hole right here. And that is to also cycle your chamber. So you can see how it springs. There's a spring in there. Now, I'll tell you a little bit more about the inside, and then we can get back to putting it back together. So if you were to happen to pull the trigger and this spring falls out, I'm going to go ahead and take it out and show you how I put it back into place. So you can see the spring flew out. This is how you'll put that back in. So here's your trigger. The spring is going to go right here inside of this hole right there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Take your spring and just slide it in to this hole, or just slide it into this little pocket. And then you have to have this piece sit against the spring. So what you're going to need to do is push back the end of the spring while you press in this little plate. It's a little tricky, but you should be able to get it in there. So you just want to apply pressure to the end of the spring and push down. There we go. So that's how it should look. So there's pressure being applied to this. There we go. So while you have your 38 Special disassembled, this is a good time to go ahead and clean the inside. So if you want to, go and watch my video on my channel about how to clean your ROHM RG38 Special. Make sure the inside's all clean before you put it back together. So we clean the chamber in the video, the plate, all of our hardware, and then just the light coating of CLP in the interior. So now we're going to get back to putting the Revolver back together. So here we go, everything is back together. We're going to be putting this plate on first, and I'll show you how to put the spring and the piston back in it as well. Throughout this video, I've been missing my trigger pin, the trigger like locking holding pin, which is what's right here. There was a hole right here. I did not have that in, and that's why my trigger wasn't cycling correctly. So make sure you put in this pin right here into the hole through your trigger, so your trigger is being held in the proper location. So now after I fix that, we're going to be putting the plate back on. This is where it gets a little tricky. So get all your parts organized. You're gonna have your plate right here. If you're like me and your spring came out, you're gonna put your spring, your plate spring into this hole right here. So put the spring in there and then take your piston piece and put it in with the skinny end forward. Skinny end towards the spring, like that. Push that in there. It's not gonna go in all the way because the spring is applying pressure to it. Now, you have everything ready to put your plate, your cover plate on. So, when you're putting this cover plate on, this swing arm has to be forward, and this piston is going to be applying pressure to the back of this swing arm. It's going to be pushing on this to keep it maintained forward. So when you're putting this on, make sure that the swing arm's forward and this piston is behind it in the back. So here we go. Take your cover plate, put it on, and you're gonna wanna apply some pressure. And again, make sure the swing arm is forward. So I kinda gotta move mine a little bit and make sure it's in the forward position. Then push your plate on. So it kinda clicked right there, but it's not all the way on. That piston has to be behind it. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. So you're gonna push with a little pick, apply some pressure onto the plate, and then push back on that piston. There we go. There we go. Hear that click? That's what you want to hear. So right now, that piston is pushing my swing arm forward. So it will constantly cycle the chamber. And you shouldn't have any edges around here. It should all be flush. Make sure everything's flush. Make sure that piston's behind there. Everything's put on correctly. You don't want to assemble your firearm incorrectly because that can lead to more problems when you go and shoot it. The next step after you have that plate on is put in your 3 screws. So you got 3 screws, 1, 2, 3. Take the screws, put them in the hole. Pretty self-explanatory. Do them with your fingers. Go finger tight first so you are not cross-threading your screws. These are also our small screws. This gun has small springs. Put everything in a small container so you're not gonna lose it as you're doing all this and putting everything back together. Then take your flathead, screw in these 3 cover plate screws. This is all pretty easy, but it's helpful to have a video to watch to go back, or if you lose anything, or if something flies out and you want to know how it looks, it's good to have a video to show you how it is put together. So put those on kind of hand tight and then go like a little over that so they're just tight. Don't want to go too crazy with tightening. But here we go. We have the cover plate on. The next step is to put in the chamber. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Here we go. Cover plate's on. Chamber time. So with the chamber, you have this little latch. It's like your chamber latch. It's gonna go in this hole right here on this side of the revolver with the writing. It's gonna go in this hole, and you're gonna use this screw in here to put it on. So we're gonna go ahead and do that right now. Take your latch piece, put it inside of your chamber. Should slide in easy, can only go in one way. Then stick the latch in this hole, hold it with your hand kind of, so you got all 3 pieces together. Then you're gonna take this screw, put it in this hole, make sure the latch is closest to the bottom, and then go ahead and screw in your screw right here. Takes a little bit. Let me go ahead and do this. So it just wasn't sitting in properly. Make sure you have your latch all the way at the bottom position so there's nothing pushing the back of the screw. And And then once you have it in, go ahead and use that same flathead and screw that in. It should stop once it's in. Then, if you've assembled everything correctly, you have your plate on, you put your piston and spring in correctly for your swing arm, you have your bolt and your trigger right here. Make sure that's in there. If that fell out, then your trigger will not pull back correctly. So make sure that's in, and then make sure you have your spring and little latch correctly right here. That's behind there. You can go back and watch that. But if you did everything correctly, your chamber should slide in and it should have a click. So when I do this, it should click into place. And now, once you have your chamber in, you can go ahead and take your long chamber screw and put that in place. There we go. So now, make sure the firearm is clear. Obviously it's clear, we just assembled it. But for YouTube, I'll show it's clear before I pull the trigger. Clear, no ammo. Everything clicks into place, everything is on properly. My chamber's on tight. Pull your hammer back. Make sure your trigger is resetting correctly. That looks good to me. The hammer is swinging perfectly fine. Do a little functions test, and now all we have left to do is put on the grips. So we're gonna go ahead and put on the grips. That's pretty easy, probably the easiest part. It's gonna be this screw right here. Throw that on there and screw it down. And there we go. You have properly assembled a ROHM 38 5-shot revolver. If you enjoyed this video or it helped you at all assemble your revolver or showed you any new information you didn't know, go ahead and leave a like on the video. Save it, share with your friends if they also have similar revolvers or similar problems. Comment if you have any questions about the revolver, if you have anything you run into while assembling it, and I'll try and answer it as best as I can. Again, this is the ROHM RG, model RG31. Here's that. She is a good little reliable revolver. Leave a like if this video helped you out, and subscribe for more. Thank you.